Oh, you got it. You.
You're here. Nice to see you.
Okay. All right, so this is the last week in the book of Ruth. And my goal in this class is that when you turn back to read Ruth again, and maybe a lot of other things that you learned in this class, that you won't pass over some of the things that just seem really, maybe just like, you know, it's easy to go over because you don't think about it. That you think about things and you go, oh, that's what that meant. Deb, did you start that? Oh, you did. Good man. Appreciate it. Okay, so last week we went through the scene at the threshing floor. After a day of threshing and winnowing, the day ended with a festive meal and drink. And when this was finished, the men would go and sleep next to their pile of grain on the threshing floor. It was during this scenario, well after midnight, in the darkness, that Ruth, who listened to Naomi, came to Boaz, who was asleep. She uncovered his feet and lay down by them as a servant would. And as he awoke, startled, and asked who it was, he heard, "I am Ruth, your maid. So spread your covering over your maid so that you are close, for you are a close relative." This was Ruth's way of asking Boaz to redeem her by marriage. She's saying, I'm your servant, but you have this position where you can change the status of us because you're a redeemer. So Boaz told Ruth that he could do it. However, there was a nearer kinsman who would be given the opportunity first. And then give Ruth 6 measures of grain to bring to Naomi, and he told her that he would take care of this quickly. So he's telling her, not only am I going to do it, but it's not going to get strung out. I'm going to take care of it quickly. Now this week, the setting of this chapter takes place at the city gates. So I wanted to show you, now these are this one here is in Jerusalem, but I wanted to show you just the difference between 1890 there, and then this one here is the same gate today, but you can see how they're kind of constructed, you know, the walls around. And this was the place where transactions and legal business was carried out. Proverbs 1 tells us that wisdom, I typed it wrong, it shouts, wisdom shouts in the street at the entrance of the gate. And then in Genesis 19, Lot was sitting at the gates of Sodom. In Esther, we read that Mordecai sat at the city gates. In 1 Samuel, it was Eli, the priest, who sat at the city gates. In Genesis 23, Abraham purchased a burial place for Sarah at the city gates. So you can see transactions are going on, and the people that have some kind of status are there so that they can engage the people. In Joshua 20, the city gate was where the manslayer was judged. You know, the city of refuge, the man would go to a certain place, and if he was deemed that it was, you know, it was manslaughter, it wasn't on purpose, that he could live there and wouldn't be put to death there. In 2 Samuel 15, Absalom won converts by offering to settle the disputes at the city gate. He made himself very pleasing to the people because David wasn't there, and that's how he started to draw away some people. And then in 2 Samuel 18 and 2 Samuel 19 and Jeremiah 38, kings sat at the city gates for legal business and to hear the people's questions and problems. In Deuteronomy 21, a rebellious son was brought to the elders of the city gate of his hometown to have discipline done. In Lamentations 5:14, it was considered tragic when the elders ceased from the city gates. So I just want to kind of share some of the scriptures that talk about city gates. See, the fact that they met there was an important focal point. People living outside or inside could go, and they knew where to meet. And when Lamentation says that it was a tragic when there was no elders at the gate, it means that like the legal system fell apart. So this week we're going to be looking at what went on at the gates in Bethlehem. Okay, so this has been the site of Bethlehem's gate since Canaanite times, and especially that one on the lower left side. But I want you to see the way they're constructed, because it's very interesting. In tribal traditions, the city was protected, and the people that came and went would go through the gate. And being that this area was the opening to the city, it would be the most vulnerable place for people to get in at, an area for attack of the enemy. So gates were constructed in a very special manner. Gates had fortified chambers within rooms inside the walls, with the courtyard also inside the wall. So someone entering the city would go through the outer gate, which led a path where these chambers were. So you go through the outer gate, and then there's these chambers, and there's going to be another door for the inner gate. Now, if you look at that picture, I put it on there, sorry. In order to get from the outside gate to the inside gate, one would have to travel past these rooms in the courtyard while being in an open area that would allow attack from above in case the enemy were trying to access. So say an enemy breaks through that outer gate, well, you got people, you can see the opening up in that top there. You would have like archers or people that could work, and they could take care of the enemy before they got to that inner gate. Okay, so that's just a little, But between all that area, there were like chambers where business would go on, sales would go on, legal things would go on, different things like that. And so with this intro, I want to give you a look in a little bit more into the city gates, things that I just explained to you.
Where is that?
This actually is in. This is in Babylon. Oops, I gotta go back. It's supposed to be a video. Oops. Come on. It was a good video, so I was hoping that it would show, but if it doesn't, it was about, I don't know, maybe only 6 minutes or something like that. But the gal explained the gates very good and looked like we may not be able to see it. But she kind of talked about the same thing that I did about the way they were constructed, and that you hear the word gate, and that's when I was starting this lesson, I said that you'll read things in a different way. Okay, you're going to read about those gates here, but you're going to read about gates in a lot of other places too. And now when you read those, it might have a different picture in your mind. And the reason I showed you Jerusalem and Bethlehem is because this was kind of like a standard the way they would build them. When you look at Babylon, same thing. Babylon, that picture on the left there, they had the distance between the inner gate and the outer gate was wide enough and went on top for 4 chariots, breast by breast, to go across. So that's a wide area. So you figure that was all still be the distance. Plus that they had a river going through, so they were pretty well protected there. I guess we're not going to get to see this, so I'm just going to move on here. Okay, so in Ruth 4:1 we read, "Now Boaz went up to the city gate and sat down there, and behold, the close relative of whom Boaz spoke was passing by. So he said, 'Turn aside, friend, and sit down here.' And he turned aside and sat down. He took 10 men of the elders of the city, and he said, 'Sit down here.' So they sat down." Okay, so Boaz is doing exactly what he promised Ruth to do. And back in Ruth 3, he said, "Remain this night. When the morning comes, if he will redeem you, good. Let him redeem you. But if he does not wish to redeem you, then I will redeem you as the Lord lives." So Boaz goes to the city gates, and he's waiting for the nearer kinsman. Like I said, this is where people go in and out. So that's positionally is where he's going to be, so that he can do everything he needs to do. It is thought that this may have been the brother of Elimelech, by the way, this near kinsman. Okay, but the interesting detail is that he's not called by name. You notice that said friend come by. He doesn't name. He calls him in the original language. It's called pelota alumni, which is an idiom used in place of a proper name and means the anonymous one, with the basic meaning of Mr. So-and-so. It's kind of like, I'm not addressing you as who you are really, but just come on over here. Boaz must have known this man being a relative and all, and however he chooses to call him friend. Boaz also must have told these 10 men to come to the gate because he was orchestrating a situation that would catch a man a little off guard. And it's really kind of clever the way he does this too. These men would serve as witnesses to a transaction that was about to occur. Now, why he chose 10 is not stated. Centuries later, 10 became the number necessary for Jewish marriage. benediction or quorum or a synagogue meeting. So there's a lot of things that go to it, but the main thing is you've got 10 men that are going to be witnesses, besides, of course, Boaz and the other guy and anybody that might have been there. Now Boaz went up to the gate and sat down there. Oh, excuse me, Boaz. Okay, I'm sorry. Boaz must have told these 10 men to come to the gate because he was, I'm sorry, I don't know what I just did here. Okay. Then he said to the closest relative, Naomi, who has come back from the land of Moab, Naomi, who has come back from the land of Moab, has to sell a piece of land which belonged to our brother Elimelech. So I thought to inform you, saying, buy it before those who are sitting here, and before the elders of the city. If you will redeem it, redeem it. But if not, tell me, that I may know, for there is no one but you to redeem it, and I am after you. And he said, I will redeem it. So what does Boaz not mention when he's talking to the relative?
Naomi.
Yeah, well, no, he mentions
Ruth.
Ruth, yeah.
He
He
did.
doesn't mention Ruth. So what he's
Yeah.
doing is he's throwing the land out before the
Right.
person, so the person goes, yeah, I'll take it. Because he's probably thinking this. He's probably thinking, Naomi's older. She doesn't have anybody down here. So, she's going to fade out. This land will be mine.
Yeah, but.
So, I'll redeem it, he says. So right now he's saying he has the possibility of being able to do this. But we're going to see something else there. He speaks of Naomi returning from Moab and that she had to sell the land for her husband Elimelech, who had died. This unnamed relative has first dibs on redeeming the land. The land was unproductive for 10 years, so you can imagine what that might have looked like while they were gone, unless he had sold it as a lease, which we don't read anything about. Naomi had no one to work the land, so selling it seemed to be the only option. So Boaz tells this relative to redeem the land, but if he can't, Boaz will redeem it, being that he is the next in line. So you kind of see how this trap is set. I love it, And the thing is, too, is Boaz is such an honorable character. He's honorable. Everybody knows who he is. He's a man of good reputation. So he's just saying something. He's not saying the whole thing, but he's saying this here. As far as the land goes, the closer relative can redeem it, and he has the means to do it. And at this point, he's willing. Now put yourself in the unnamed relative's shoes, okay? He can assume the role of kinsman redeemer by buying the land from Naomi, but part of that role means that he must raise up a child for Elimelech, in which the inheritance will be passed on to. But Naomi's old, and so this almost seems like the perfect deal, okay? He buys the land. He doesn't have to worry about a child that's going to inherit that because, she's old. And he doesn't have to foster a child from Naomi, which means the land doesn't get passed on, but stays with him and he prospers. So the way in which Boaz laid out this situation forced this man to commit that moment, and the relative did. So he's sitting there, he's before 10 witnesses, and he goes, I'll buy it. Yeah, I'll do it. I'm able to do it. I've got the money. I'll do it. And so he says, sure, I'll redeem it. And he makes the statement in front of Boaz and the 10 witnesses. Then Boaz said, on the day that you buy the field from the hand of Naomi, you must also acquire Ruth the Moabitess, the widow of the deceased, in order to raise up the name of the deceased on his inheritance. The closest relative said, I cannot redeem it for myself because I would jeopardize my own inheritance. Redeem it for yourself. You may have my right of redemption, for I cannot redeem it. So, at this point, the nearer kinsman sees Naomi, older without a husband, thinks that he's going to be able to keep the land, and he's willing to pay the price of redemption as long as there's no risk on his part. It's a win-win. I get the land, and I'm not risking anything. Then Boaz says, oh, and by the way, there's one more thing. There's one more thing. On the day that you buy this land from Naomi, you must acquire Ruth, the widow of the deceased, son of Elimelech, in order to raise up the name of the deceased on his inheritance. Notice that he calls her Ruth the Moabitess. That's precision there, because the way this worked according to Levirate marriage law is that the Redeemer marries the widow, and the first son of that union becomes the legal heir of Elimelech. Now the situation's changed. Now there's a risk involved. If the man has a son with Ruth, that son inherits all of Elimelech's land, and if the Redeemer doesn't have another son, then all his land is in jeopardy of being passed on because he doesn't have his own sons. So now there's a risk involved there, see? Now there's somebody that can produce an heir, and if I gamble and take her, and we do that, and then she doesn't have any other sons, I'm sunk. Okay? The point of naming Ruth, Ruth the Moabite would add a degree of anxiety to the near kinsman, because he may think anyway, not only would he lose his land if he doesn't have his own heir, but the land would be going to a wife that was a foreigner and banned from the assembly. So she's not looking really favorable, though, although the people of the town saw her as a very honorable person. This is just what this guy is thinking here. This potential redeemer has already said that he would redeem, so at this point, he realizes that he can't have the land without entering into marriage with Ruth. And it's interesting because I think Boaz just wanted Ruth. I mean, he wanted to help Naomi, but he just wanted her as a bride, you know. The other guy just wanted the land. So he passes his right of redemption on to Boaz because he fears his own inheritance would be jeopardized. The land that he used his own money to purchase would be passed on to another son. So this man feared more about losing what he had than to honor his responsibility as a kinsman to Naomi. Sometimes in life we have to put what we want, maybe, you know, possibility of losing for doing a more honorable thing, you know, for doing a more honorable thing. And that is just a matter of the Lord working in us to build a character that can be pleasing to him out there. And at the time it looks like, oh, I'm going to lose everything if I do this, but I'm going to do it, you know. And he sees that. And I don't think you ever have to worry about losing something when you have the Lord first in your life. Now this was the custom, remove his sandal and gave it to another, and this was the manner of attestation in Israel. So the closest relative said to Ruth, buy it for yourself, and he removed his sandal. Okay, so when the man refused his right as a redeemer in those days, there was a custom that he'd take off his sandal and he'd give it to the kinsman who was willing to redeem it. This custom was actually earlier laid out in the law, and I want to show you how it changed a bit. In Deuteronomy 25, 8-10, Moses wrote, then the elders of the city shall summon him and speak to him, and if he says, I do not desire to take her, then his brother's wife, in this case it would be Ruth, okay, then his brother's wife shall come to him in the sight of the elders, pull his sandal off his foot, and spit in his face, and she shall declare, thus it is done to the man who does not build up his brother's house. In Israel, his name shall be called the house of him whose sandal is removed. So it was a disgrace. I mean, you can imagine the widow. He says, I can't do it. So he pulls off his sandal, spits in his face. This is what's done. Everybody sees it, and you know. But in our passage, however, the man who refuses takes off his own sandal and hands it to the kinsman who will redeem. The man would still be discredited for his refusal, but without a full implication of what the law had laid out. Again, remember that we're living in the time of Judges when people did what was right in their own eyes, and they didn't follow everything exactly the way the law is. So this kind of changed over the time into maybe a more honorable thing for the person that disagrees.
I wonder why they used the sandal. What?
Well,
because you couldn't go anywhere without them? I mean, you couldn't.
yeah, I'll talk about that in just a second, okay?
All right.
So the man who gave his sandal would walk in such a way as to draw notice that he had no sandal. People could put two and two together. Okay, why is this guy, you know, he must have been involved in that, you know?
There we go.
Removing the sandal was a symbolic way of forfeiting one's right to the land. The Redeemer who had received this sandal had physical proof that he had gained the redemption right from the other man. Along with that, there were 10 witnesses who had seen and heard this transaction. He's got a receipt. It's a shoe, but he's got a receipt, okay? In Genesis 13, 14-17, God told Abram, he said, now lift up your eyes and look from the place where you are, northward, southward, eastward, and westward. For all the land which you see, I will give it to you and your descendants forever. I will make your descendants as the dust of the earth, so that if anyone can number the dust of the earth, then your descendants can also be numbered. Arise, walk about the land to the length and the breadth, for I give it to you. He's walking that land, of course, in his sandals. It's like, this is mine. So Abram would walk the land that God promised him, and having the sandal was a way of saying that Boaz was stepping into the man's place to do what the man should have done. So he's taken the land, he's got the receipt that the man gave it to him, and now he's walking in the place of the guy that should have married Ruth and honored this agreement. So there's a little bit more to the story that, and I don't know, nowadays you go back, I lost my shoe, I go back, open my closet, and there's all kinds of put somewhere. I don't know what it was like back then, maybe they had extra pairs or something like that, but maybe not.
And those shoes, I think about orthotic footwear and stuff that we have now. And
Yeah,
those shoes-
stuff like that, so it'd be just a little bit there,
And Jesus said, shake the dust from your, when you leave, if they don't listen, shake the dust from your sandal.
Yeah.
And they use sandal a lot,
Yeah.
actually.
And if you did a study on just like shoes and that, you're gonna see so many more things in it, like, hey, look at these sandals, okay, they don't look great and all that. Now think back when the Israelites were in the wilderness for 40 years, their sandals didn't wear out,
That's right.
they traveled through that and God preserved them. So that's just one thing. And then like you said, shaking the dust from your feet, where you've gone, I'm shaking any remnant of that because I came to you and you wouldn't listen. I'm moving on. Then Boaz said to the elders and all the people, you are witnesses today that I have bought from the land of Naomi and all that belonged to Elimelech, and all that belonged to Chilion and Mahlon. Moreover, I have acquired Ruth the Moabitess, the widow of Mahlon, to be my wife, in order to raise up the name of the deceased on his inheritance, so that the name of the deceased will not be cut off from his brothers, or from the court of his birthplace. You are witnesses today. Twice he says that you are witnesses, okay? He's saying you're witnesses that I bought the land, you're witnesses that I'm taking Ruth as my wife. So before the unnamed kinsman and the 10 elders of the city, Boaz took full responsibility for the role of kinsman redeemer for Naomi. All right, so that's, and it's important for us to see this, and I'll probably mention it again later on. I don't know if I'll put it in my notes, but Boaz is an older guy, right? So say he has a son with Ruth, so she becomes the son of Elimelech. That's how that is looked at, okay? Now, if Boaz didn't have another son than all that he had, he'd be in the same situation as that unnamed relative, right? But he doesn't care. He's going to do it, because it's right. We needed someone who could redeem us in the land that had been forfeited to another. The closer relative is widely taken to typify the one who would not fulfill the requirement of the law. In this case, it could be us also, the closer relative, because of Jesus, right? We're closer to each other, but Jesus came. 10 witnesses, the 10 commandments, confirm its inability to redeem the sinner. The law can't redeem those whom it condemns. It would only be against its own, it would be against its own purpose. We needed a redeemer. We needed a Boaz. In Romans 8:3 it says, for what the law could not do, weak as it was through the flesh, God did, sending his own son in the likeness of sinful flesh, and as an offering for sin, he condemned the sin in the flesh. If he condemned the sin in the flesh for us, then we would be no more, because we had sin on us. But because he did that with Jesus had no sin, he could conquer death through this. So Jesus not only redeemed us, but he also fulfilled the requirements of the law. So in essence, the law testifies of Christ's righteousness. I came to redeem them, and I fulfilled everything that needed to be fulfilled in the law. And no one ever has done that. But Jesus did, okay? So all the people who were at the court and the elders said, we are witnesses. May the Lord make the woman who is coming into your home, who's Ruth, like Rachel and Leah, both of whom built the house of Israel, and may you achieve wealth in Ephrathah and become famous in Bethlehem. Okay, so for all practical purposes, Boaz was risking his own inheritance by taking Ruth to be his wife, which I had mentioned that. The people understood this, and they respected him and what he had done. When they said, may the Lord make the woman who is coming into your house like Rachel and Leah, they were asking God to bless this union with many sons. Because it was Rachel and Leah that had the 10 sons that became the 10 tribes of Israel, right? So may you be blessed like Rachel and Leah. May you produce many sons. So so in their celebration, that's how they're petitioning for a blessing. And finally, they asked God to bless Boaz with much wealth in Ephrathah, which is another name for Bethlehem. And you'll read that in Micah 5:2, when it says, you Bethlehem Ephrathah, the little among the clans, out of you shall come one from who is of old, from eternity. You know, when it's predicted, prophesying that Jesus would be born. So Ephrathah is another way of saying Bethlehem. Make Boaz's name famous in Bethlehem. So may he not only do this redeeming work, but give him sons like you gave Rachel and Leah. Make his name famous for this, you know. And this is the people do it. So, you know, they love this guy. Moreover, may your house be like the house of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah through the offspring which the Lord will give you by this young woman. Okay, so this petition continued as the people asked the Lord to bless Boaz through Ruth in that house that would be like the house of Perez. And to understand this, the house of Perez, you have to go back to Genesis 38. Okay? In Genesis 38, excuse me just a second. Okay, that's fine. In Genesis 38, there was a man named Judah, okay? And Judah had sons, okay? His first son's name was and he married Tamar, okay? And they produced no children, and the Lord took Er's life, or whatever you pronounce it. Second son was Onan, who married Tamar, and he just, he purposely didn't impregnate her, you might say. And so the Lord took his life. The third son was Shelah, and he wasn't given to Tamar because he was a little bit younger. Judah was kind of saying, like, wait till he grows up, wait till he kind of pushing off. But I think Judah was probably thinking, you're going to take him too. So Tamar takes matters into her own hands. She dresses up as a religious harlot, and she waits outside the town. So when Judah is passing through, she engages him, and he has he goes with Tamar and has, you know, sex with her, and he says, I will come back later and I will pay you. I don't have it, so I'll come back. In the meantime, I'm going to give you my staff, and this is who I am, right? So he goes back, and Tamar leaves. She doesn't wait for him to come back, and she gets pregnant. And later on, when she's pregnant, the people in the city are going, look at Tamar is pregnant without a husband. And Judah says, you know, he condemns her for it. And she says, by the man who owns these is how I got pregnant. Mm-hmm. And Judah says, you're you know, more honorable than I am, you know. And so as a result, he ends up marrying Tamar. So, but it was like kind of like constructed for that to happen, right? Because she wanted to have that, you know, babies, right? The children were twins that are born from the union of Judah and Tamar. They were Perez and Zerah. Perez became the leading family within the tribe of Judah. Boaz was also from the tribe of Judah, so the people are asking the Lord to make Boaz a blessing by being in this seed line of Messiah. So they're not only saying, please make their family productive like Rachel and Leah and having all these boys, but also make him notable in the seed line of the Messiah that's going to come. So it almost seems like a toast, but it's not a toast. They're praising, but that's kind of like it is. You know, all this goodness, they're hoping for Boaz. Now, there's some similarities between Ruth and Tamar. Okay. Both were Gentiles. Both were widows without children. Both were redeemed. Both married older husbands. Both received what was theirs under the law through creative means. Now, because of Naomi, Ruth came to know her Jewish God. If Naomi had never come to Moab, Ruth would never know her. So because of Naomi, Ruth came to know her Jewish God, Redeemer, and husband. Because of Ruth, Naomi receives her own deliverer, Obed, in the line of the Messiah. And because the premise of this class on the book of Ruth is seeing Jesus in the Old Testament, on the next slide, I want you to look at Naomi as a type of Israel, and I want you to look at Ruth as a type of the church, and look at Boaz as a type of Christ. Okay, so these are just some observations here. In order to bring Ruth to Naomi, Naomi had to be exiled from her land. Okay, and Israel was exiled from her land. You know, what the law could not do, grace did. The law couldn't save the people, but grace could save them. Ruth does not replace Naomi. She just moves into a void, you might say. Naomi's people has been exiled, and when that happened in the Old Testament, or in the New Testament in AD 70, of course, God grafted in the church, and the church took the place of what Israel was supposed to do, and but he didn't replace her, he just kept them out there. Ruth learns of Boaz's ways through Naomi. Okay. We learn of, if Ruth is a picture of the church, we learn of Christ's ways through Israel, you might say. Okay, we learned about that because everything, the foundation of what we see was because the Lord was going to bring a Savior into the world. So we learn about what Christ did by knowing what was required. You see what I'm saying? I may not be explaining that as well as I should, but important. Naomi meets Boaz through Ruth. So Israel will meet Christ through the church, you might say. Through the thing. We read in Romans, I believe it's chapter 9, that when the church is grafted, and I encourage you to read chapter 9 through 11 in Romans, because it shows you how when the church was grafted in, it was partial blindness happened to Israel until the time of the Gentiles was fulfilled. In other words, until the message went out where the Lord wanted, and he pulls the church out of the picture. And then, yes?
Which chapter?
Romans chapter 9 through 11. And you know, it's like I think you sent me a text on it, Linda, when you said, you know, some of these things are hard to understand, you know, through Peter saying that. And it is. You can read Romans over and over again. What is he saying? But you know, you read it slowly, you put things together, and you see, okay, I understand the bigger picture here. You just look at this one book, it's kind of tough, but then you see how things are unfolding. And he's saying, partial blindness came over Israel until the time the Gentiles were fulfilled. Until God was finished what he was doing through the church, there was partial blindness. Not a complete, because a lot of Jews still came to know the Lord, okay, but a partial blindness. And then when he removes the church out of the picture, you're going to have Israel, his attention will turn back to Israel, and we'll see what he unfolds there. No matter how much Boaz, Christ, loved the church, he had to wait for her to move. And I'm saying that no matter how much Jesus loved us, we had to come to him. You know, we had to come to him. He couldn't just take us and that was it. We had to come to her. He had to wait for our move. Of course, he allures us. He draws us to him. He lays so many things in front of us that you just can't help. In my life, there were so many different little situations that happened all at the same time that made me realize the importance of that this life might not be all there is. There was a guy that lived over my back fence, and he had, and I've probably told some of the classes before, but he was about the age of me, and he had a son about the age of my oldest one, Jeremiah. And he was growing pot in his backyard and all this, and one day he took his son out to, I think, Lake Don Pedro or one of those, and his boat capsized and both of them died. And so, you know, I don't know how that would strike you, but it strikes me as somebody my age and my oldest son could end just like that. Now, nothing happened all at once with that, but that was one little thing that moved like that. And then he started drawing my wife to read the scriptures in different ways. And then he started drawing me to read the scriptures. I still wasn't saved, but I'm reading things and pieces are fitting together, and he's moving my heart in a way that I can't explain, except that it was more encouraging than drugs could ever do. You know, it was something I couldn't wait to do when I got home, you know. And then when I went to work, I couldn't wait to listen to things, you know, over and over again for, you know, 37 years that I worked in the grocery business. I was doing that every night, unless I forgot back then it was first of all cassette, then I went to a CD player, and then it became like an iPod with it, you know what I mean? I went through all the things, but I would listen to everything. In this very room, I literally went through all the tapes that were in the library here that I would listen to in growing in my walk with him. So the Lord draws you. He draws you. Not only that, but all you have to do is look at some things in creation and you go, how could that happen, This is so neat. Look at a duck-billed platypus or a hummingbird, or, they're so different. So they had to be a designer. They had to be a designer, You're not going to get a platypus turned into a hummingbird over millions and millions of years, I'll tell you that much, right? Okay. And Boaz, so think about it, Christ, not Ruth, confronts the nearer kinsman. So Christ is confronting this individual that should be he's confronting Israel. Okay. And then we have, so Boaz took Ruth and she became his wife. And he went into her, and the Lord enabled her to conceive, and she gave birth to a son. And then the woman said to Naomi, "Blessed is the Lord who has not left you without a redeemer today, and may his name become famous in Israel." Especially highlighted that word famous. "May he also be to you a restorer of life and a sustainer of your old age, for your daughter-in-law who loves you and is better to you than 7 sons has given birth to him." So out of this union between Ruth and Boaz, a son's born. The women praise this baby boy as a redeemer, and they say, may his name become famous. And the word famous means called upon. May his name become called upon in the land of Israel. And you think about that as it goes forward. Okay, this baby boy will grow up, and now there'll be another son, and Messiah will come. And may his name be called upon, may it become famous, may his name be called upon in Israel. So you see that the picture of what wants to happen here. All Israel should come to know the Lord. Hopefully it won't happen, but the Lord will call them also. Then Naomi took the child and laid him in her lap and became his nurse. The neighbor woman gave him a name, saying, "A son has been born to Naomi." So they named him Obed. He is the father of Jesse, the father of David. So notice that the parents didn't name the child. It was a neighbor woman who named him Obed, which means servant or serving. And it's from the root word that means worshiping. So, and I don't think they said, you're going to name him. They go, oh, this is Obed, and Ruth was so happy that, so she lays the baby on Naomi, and Naomi's thinking, this is legally my son who will inherit everything that should have been there. And Ruth is, I look at Ruth and Boaz as not selfish people. I don't see them as, well, you remember when Rachel had Joseph? No, I'm sorry. When Isaac was born, remember she was looking at Hagar, and she was getting jealous of that, so she wanted a descendant. I don't see that in this picture here. I see two people that have such great character that this is all of God's will and this is fine. And it doesn't say it, but I can't help but think that Ruth was there quite a bit, looking at this little baby too. Okay. Now these are the generations of Perez to whom was born Hezron, and to Hezron was born Ram, and to Ram Abinadab, and to Abinadab was born Nahshon, and to Nahshon Salmon. And Salmon was born Boaz, and Boaz Obed, and to Obed was born Jesse, and to Jesse David. Okay, so it just seems like another one of these genealogies when you look at it, but it's important for us to see this. But I want you to look at something what the scripture says. It says in Deuteronomy 23 that no one of illegitimate birth shall enter the assembly of the Lord. None of his descendants, even to the 10th generation, shall enter the assembly of the Lord. And that's Perez, because that was an illegitimate birth. Remember, Tamar came to Judah? Okay, so he shouldn't enter into the assembly of the Lord to 10 generations. Right after that verse in Deuteronomy, it says, no Ammonite or Moabite shall enter the assembly of the Lord. None of their descendants, even to the 10th generation, shall ever enter the assembly of the Lord. And that's Ruth, the wife of Boaz. So 10 generations from an illegitimate birth and from a Moabite shall not enter into the assembly of the Lord. Now look at these names. To these generations of 1 Perez was born Hezron, 2 Hezron, 3 Ram, 4 Abinadab, 5 Nahshon, 6 Salmon, 7 Boaz, 8 Obed, 9 Jesse, and 10 David. You get to the point where the symbol of the Lord, David's going to be the king of them. I think it's just kind of fascinating that two different passages talk like you can't enter into this, and then even your nationality can't enter into this, and yet both of those things were involved in this, and it happened exactly the way God said. With this little genealogy ending with David, the reader is prepared for a monarchy and the next books in biblical order, 1 and 2 Samuel. Solomon lived at the beginning of the period of the judges. You look at that, number 6. He lived at the beginning of the period of the judges, and David was not born until the beginning of the period of the kings. It was a span of about 400 years. Names are often deliberately omitted in biblical genealogies, but this is here for us to understand that God did exactly what he was going to do. Now, I'm going to show this next slide, and this is in the take it or leave it category, okay? Because it's just something I found fascinating, but you might think that's weird, so if you do, just leave it, okay? But there is such a thing called equidistant letter sequence, which means that in the Hebrew scriptures, you can look at a pattern where every so many letters, something will come up, and then another one, and it'll spell out something. In Genesis 38, that's the book that talked about Tamar and Judah. This is what it looks like. Yeah, it's kind of small, huh? But what you see is...
Small? It's not in our language.
Well, yeah, it's Hebrew, okay. But I want to ask you, is it possible that the God of all creation placed in his word something that those who dug deep would find, and through this come to believe in Messiah? You know, something past just the surface reading, but maybe an intense scholar that was really embraced in Judaism saw something. So this is amazing. It was only available really in recent times. I mean, they did it in the past, but now you can like type it in. You can see these things. With the advent of computer, it shows yet another testament of God who knows the beginning from the end, and how he gives yet another clue besides prophecy, types, and shadows for those who dig deep for a reason. What you have here in the book of 13th chapter of Genesis, you have Boaz, Ruth. Each one of these are named in 49 letter sequences. B, the 49 letters. O, the 49 letters. A, the 49 letters C. And then you get Ruth named the same way. Then you get Obed named in the same way. Then you get Jesse named in the same way. Then you get David named in the same way. And they're in the exact order that they should be too. So it can be just kind of nuts, just kind of crazy. You're throwing it out there. But I think it's kind of fascinating when you see something that's... And I look at the way God will do so many different things to draw so many different people to him. And if you ever talk with people about the Lord, you'll hear some of the testimonies and you'll think, wow, that's what one, you know, guy in prison, you know, I couldn't do anything anymore, so I looked up. And or somebody on the streets, I just about died and I read this tract. You know, so many little things that the Lord will use to draw people to him. Yes?
How did you come up with this?
I actually, it's through a writing of Chuck Missler.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and he talks about that. He's got a book called The Cosmic Codes, and it's not weird. It sounds, because a lot of people have these biblical codes things, and they can be weird. But there's there's some things that are just very interesting too. Like I think it's the word Torah. Let me see how this goes. No, I won't be able to remember it. I can't remember it properly. But I think it's like the first two letters. I'm not going to say it because I don't remember it, okay? But it's like something points forward, something points backwards, and right in the middle it says Yahweh, which I think is really kind of neat, you know? So there's little things. Not anything that you want to build a doctrine on, not anything that you want to say, oh, this is good, let's follow that. But it's something that I kind of register when I look at these things, because I think that's kind of cool, you know? I mean, I know what the word says here, but that also was in something like that, you know? So just kind of interesting. So I'm hoping that, that you reread through the book of Ruth through the lens of everything that you've heard and learned, and see if it blesses you when you read other things going down the road, like you read about sandals, or you read about gates, or you read about, you know, the threshing floor, or pomegranates, yeah, you know, the pomegranates, or you read about, you know, just the nature of the way life worked back then. They're not just a few choice words in a group of passages in the Bible, but it was a way of life that was doing. When that season of threshing came, it was, think about just working in the fields every single day, and then finally you harvest, and there's just a great joy as you're looking at what you've saved. And did you notice all the little things of grain I blended in there in that first picture in there? Yeah, by the threshing floor. Because, you know, they would have had the grain all around, and they would have been celebrating. It would have been just a great time. Because harvest meant not only was the season ending, but you provided for us, you know, provision. You brought the rains, you made things grow. They're acknowledging that God was the one that did this. Any questions or things you want to talk about?
I read Ruth, and then I read it again after the class, and it was so more real to me, so more just was, you know, came out of the book, and so that makes it a lot easier for me when you do the class and to reread the scripture.
Yeah, you know, and
I understand it.
And, you know, that's what I really want for everybody is I want you guys to be, you know, you're self-feeders. You dig into stuff and you see things, you go, that's so neat, you know. When you got these passages, you read something and you see something that shows a cross reference, and you turn back to that and go, hey, it was right here. It started off doing this, and then started off here. And you look at some of the things, the first area where something's mentioned kind of sets a pattern for the rest. So you put things together and you see the big picture, which is, it makes it more exciting, you know. Like I told you, we've been reading through the Bible at home. You know, we had to have started through years ago. I think there's 900 and something chapters in the Bible. We read a chapter a night, not counting Sunday, and we just finished 1 John. So we've got 2 John, 3 John, Jude, and Revelation, you know. And but that's just a chip away at things. And you read slowly, but when I'm telling you that because when I'm going through this now, I kind of talk to Gavin about different things that I've learned. You know, it's not a big lecture or anything like that, but it's just kind of interesting things that you see, you know, and you can understand things. And that's what God wants to do. He wants us to know His Word because we're living in a generation that doesn't know His Word. And this generation is doing what's right in their own eyes. When you read of that, when you look around the world, when you look at different demonstrations and the way people see this and that, you know, and it just, neck hurting. Yeah. Did he touch your neck?
No.
Oh, okay. Anyway, any other questions or anything? Yeah.
When are we gonna do Bible trivia?
He wants to do this Bible trivia thing. I had a template here where I put Jeopardy up in there, and I filled in all the categories, you know, and then I put the little questions in there, and they'd be really weird, like begins with A and ends with A, bad girls of the Bible, good kings, bad kings, you know. It was kind of fun, but a lot of times when in class, there was only a few people that would answer it, you know. So, and I had like a little button that would applaud if they got it right, or go, if they got it wrong, and but it was kind of, it was just kind of.
People then, there's not enough. There's not enough people right now.
I would have to do it in a different way, the way we just go one person by one person, and then a lot of people do. Like Bill knows almost all the answers, but if he's put on the spot, it's kind of tough sometimes. You know how that is, right?
It is.
And then you leave and you go, I knew that, you know? I wish you knew I knew that. But, so that's kind of a fun thing, but maybe we can look at something else we can do that'll be kind of fun like that. I know he would like to.
One time I woke him up by pressing a buzzer.
Yeah.
So you have any idea what you want to do next?
I don't know. I would like to do another. Look at Jesus through the Old Testament. I had to look at the book that I want to do it in, and chances are it wouldn't be a verse by verse thing because a lot of those things it would be like sections of it. Like in Genesis, you know, I wouldn't probably read all of it, because you look at the seed of woman, and you look at the different lineage of them, and in Exodus, of course, there's a Passover lamb. Numbers is really cool, because it shows the way the tribes were stationed, and they stationed in the shape of a cross, which is kind of interesting. That comes into view when you think about Balaam trying to curse Israel, and he's looking down on the mountain, and he's seeing this huge Israel encampment, but it's in the shape of a cross. He doesn't understand that, but we look back here, or you see the snake held up on a bronze snake held up on a standard, that whoever looked at that would be saved. Another picture of Jesus. Just a lot of different things that and then the overall look about how nobody could approach God except the high priest, and he had to cleanse himself, he had to do all these washings, and then he could go in only once a year. And Jesus came as our high priest and rent those curtains, so that we had access to the Lord through him, through a high priest that doesn't need to do that. So I don't know. I have to think of it, and I don't know if we'll have class next week. I'm planning on it, but I'll have to work overtime. I'll look at something. The Lord will bring something to mind on that. But there's a lot of good things out there.
Next Sunday's communion, y'all.
That's right.
It's the
April's
first
gone
Sunday,
already.
yeah. So next Sunday, y'all will have
Yeah.
the Lord's
Maybe
Supper.
even if it's going to be like a right now teaching or something like that, which I may do, I'll contact everybody, let you know about that. And we have, show that here and then ask some questions. I just do some research on it. Okay, I skimmed through that thing that you had, Linda. I didn't go through it really deep. It looks pretty good. It looks like you have to, that they're drawing things. Just beware of everything that you read. That's all I can say, is because I followed different things before I got to a certain thing and go, that doesn't sound right. I'm not saying that's that, because that looks like it's pretty good, because it's teaching you how to observe and to make notes of things, and then application, all that stuff. That's good. All these things. I went through all kinds of different little classes like that and growing, and it just kind of, when you learn different ways of learning the scriptures, not different ways of learning, but it's like hitting it at a different angle, so that now when you're looking at it, you see things in a different way. That's why I like to listen to people that are really smart, because they'll say things like, I never thought about that, and go look at it and go, yeah, I didn't ever see that before, So anyway, that's just hopefully it motivates you to want to learn, read Ruth again, and we'll come up with something that we can all grow in, okay? So Lord, I want to thank you for these 4 weeks of Ruth, and Lord, I just thank you for Ruth. I thank you for the woman Ruth, Lord. I thank you for Boaz and Naomi. I thank you for an account that has deep meaning in your word, Lord. And I think about those Jewish people who read that book every Pentecost and maybe not see all the pictures of what's going on there, Lord, but that they do that. Maybe some of them will question why it is, and maybe they'll see past just the words and come to know you, Lord, and I hope that will be that. I pray for the peace of Israel, Lord. I pray for Jerusalem. I thank you for our lives, Lord, and that you've made us all people that can learn your word in this age that we're living at, Lord, in this crazy age. Make us wise so that we can tell others about you, Lord. Help them not see something crazy. Help them see the truth come from our lips, Lord, so that we can lead many to you. Thank you for this day. I ask you to bless the service later on, Lord, and I just thank you for all the people here. In Jesus' name, amen.